The Valley of Elah was not just a geographic location, it was a theater of psychological warfare. For 40 days, the giant Goliath stood at the edge of the canyon, shouting defiance against the armies of Israel. He didn't just bring a sword, he brought a frequency of fear that paralyzed an entire nation. Fear is a shadow that grows larger when you stop moving toward the light. Every morning and every evening the giant's voice echoed, creating a prison of intimidation. The soldiers of Saul were experts in traditional combat, but they were defeated before the battle even began because they allowed the giant to define the scale of the conflict. This is the first trap of the enemy, to make you believe that the problem is bigger than the God who is within you. We look at our bank accounts, our medical reports, or our broken relationships, and we see Goliaths. We see walls that cannot be climbed and weapons that cannot be counted. But what the army of Israel failed to realize was that Goliath's height was his greatest weakness. His size made him a bigger target, not a bigger threat. Today, the sovereign path begins by changing your perspective. You must stop measuring your giant against your own strength and start measuring him against the sovereignty of the king. The giant is not an obstacle. He is an opportunity for a divine demonstration. It is time to stop trembling at the noise and start looking for the stone. While the elite soldiers were shaking in their armor, a young shepherd boy was making his way to the front lines. David didn't come from a military academy, he came from the wilderness. His credentials were not written on scrolls of honor but on the scars of his hands. The secret place we discussed earlier, that was David's training ground. While he was alone with the sheep, he wasn't just killing time, he was killing lions and bears. No one saw his victories in the woods. No one cheered when he wrestled the predator to save the one lamb. This is the law of the kingdom. God prepares you in private for what he intends to do with you in public. The wilderness was not a punishment, it was a laboratory of faith. David learned that the same God who protected him from the lioness' paw would be the same God to deliver him from the giantess' hand. Your current struggle, the one that no one sees, is actually your divine apprenticeship. Every tear you shed in private, every prayer you whispered when you felt abandoned, was a stone being polished for your Goliath. Do not despise the day of small beginnings or the season of isolation. The sovereign path requires a heart that has been tempered in the shadows. You are not being ignored. You are being prepared. The weight of the crown requires the strength of the struggle. When David stepped forward to volunteer, King Saul tried to clothe him in royal armor. It was a gesture of logic. Saul thought that to defeat a giant, you needed the giant's methods. He gave David a bronze helmet, a coat of mail, and a heavy sword. But David couldn't move. He realized a profound truth that every believer must learn. You cannot win God's battles using the world's weapons. If David had worn Saul's armor, he would have died like Saul. The world will always try to force you into its mold. It will tell you to use manipulation to get ahead, to use anger to defend yourself, or to use debt to find security. But the sovereign path is walked in the spirit, not in the flesh. David stripped off the heavy metal and reached for his staff and his sling. He chose what was familiar to his spirit over what was impressive to the eye. Your greatest strength is not your ability to mimic others. It is your authenticity before God. You don't need a corporate degree to have a divine breakthrough. You don't need 1,000 followers to have a powerful voice. You only need the equipment that God has specifically assigned to your soul. Do not be intimidated by those who look more prepared than you. If God called you to the valley, he has already provided the stones you need. Shake off the armor of man and put on the mantle of the Spirit. David went down to the brook and chose 5 smooth stones. Why 5? Some say it was because Goliath had 4 brothers, but spiritually it represents the completeness of divine preparation. A smooth stone is a stone that has been shaped by the constant pressure and flow of the water. This is a metaphor for the Word of God. The stones that David picked up were not jagged or rough, they had been refined by the current. In your life, the stones you carry are the promises of God that have been tested in the river of your own experience. You need a word that is smooth, a word that has been integrated into your very being through prayer and meditation. When you face your giant, you don't need a library of theology. You need one smooth promise that fits perfectly in the sling of your faith. Each stone represents a dimension of God's character, his faithfulness, his power, his justice, his love, and his sovereignty. David didn't need a mountain of rocks, he only needed 5, and he only intended to use 1. The precision of faith is more powerful than the volume of effort. As you walk your own valley today, ask yourself, what stones am I carrying? Have I spent enough time in the brook of God's presence to have a word ready for the fight? The battle is won in the selection of the stone, long before it is thrown. As David approached Goliath, the giant laughed. He looked at the boy and saw a curse. He cursed David by his gods, trying to pull David into a battle of religions. But David didn't respond with a curse, he responded with a decree. This is the moment where the sovereign path shifts from a walk to a run. David said, "You come to me with a sword, a spear, and a javelin, but I come to you in the name of the Lord of hosts." This was a clash of authorities. Goliath represented the authority of the physical world, muscle, steel, and reputation. David represented the authority of the invisible kingdom. David understood that the name of the Lord is a strong tower. When you speak that name with the authority of the secret place, the spiritual realm must align. David didn't wait for Goliath to move. He ran toward the battle line. He didn't hesitate or doubt. He He knew that the giant's forehead was wide and the target was clear. When you stop running from your problems and start running toward them in the name of Jesus, the power dynamic changes. The giant is used to people fleeing. He is not prepared for someone who is coming with the backing of the throne. The air in the valley shifted as David's voice cut through the intimidation. The king of the universe was now the commander of the shepherd boy. The moment of impact was not a product of luck, it was a collision of destiny and preparation. As David reached into his bag, he wasn't just grabbing a rock, he was grasping a physical manifestation of his trust in the Almighty. He placed the stone in the sling, and in that circular motion he was winding up the justice of God against the arrogance of man. The world watched a boy, but the spiritual realm watched a guided missile of divine judgment. When the stone left the sling, it traveled with the velocity of 40 years of Israel's suppressed hope. It didn't just hit Goliath, it found the only vulnerable entry point in his pride, the space between his eyes. This is the precision of the sovereign path. When you act in obedience, God takes your small, humble effort and adds his infinite momentum to it. You don't need 1,000 stones. You need one stone thrown with zero doubt. The giant didn't even have time to raise his shield. The stone sank into his forehead, and the mountain of flesh and bronze collapsed into the dust. The sound of Goliath hitting the ground was the sound of a stronghold being demolished. It was the proof that the invisible is always superior to the visible. Your stone, that prayer, that act of faith, that seed you sowed is moving right now. It is traveling toward the head of your problem, and it will not miss its mark. What happened next is one of the most powerful strategies of the kingdom. David stood over the fallen giant, but he had no sword of his own. So, he reached down and drew Goliath's own sword from its sheath. He used the enemy's weapon to finish the enemy's reign. This is the redemptive reversal. The very thing the enemy intended to use to destroy you, the debt, the trauma, the betrayal, is the very thing God will use to establish your victory. God doesn't just want to save you from your giants, he wants to give you their swords as trophies. David didn't just win a battle, he gained a weapon that would serve him for years to come. Every time you overcome a trial on the sovereign path, you gain spiritual steel. You gain an authority that can only be forged in the heat of battle. The sword of Goliath became a testimony that what was meant for evil, God turned for good. Do not be afraid of the weapons being brandished against you right now. If you stand in faith, those very weapons will eventually be in your hands, serving your purpose in God's glory. Your greatest testimony will come from the very area where the enemy tried to kill your spirit. The giant is down, but the victory is sealed when you take back the ground he stole. When Goliath fell, something shifted in the atmosphere of the entire valley. The army of Israel, which had been hiding in trenches for 40 days, suddenly felt a surge of supernatural courage. They didn't see a giant anymore. They saw a corpse. They didn't see a boy anymore. They saw a leader. David's private victory in the valley triggered a public awakening for a nation. This is the ripple effect of the sovereign path. Your courage is contagious. When you decide to face your giant, you aren't just winning for yourself. You are breaking the spirit of fear over your family, your community, and your generation. One person standing in their divine identity can liberate 1,000 others who are stuck in their trenches. The Israelites rose up with a shout that shook the earth and pursued their enemies until the victory was complete. Your breakthrough is a signal to everyone around you that God is still on the throne. Don't play small. Your life is a blueprint for others. When they see you walk through the fire without the smell of smoke, they will find the strength to walk through their own. Your David season is not just about your promotion. It's about the mobilization of an army that has been asleep for too long. The Valley of Elah was the bridge between David the shepherd and David the king. He entered the valley as an errand boy bringing bread to his brothers, and he left as the national hero of Israel. The giant was the gatekeeper to his destiny. Without Goliath, David might have stayed in the fields for another 20 years. The very obstacle that was sent to stop him was the one that promoted him. This is the irony of the sovereign path. Your greatest problem is often the shadow of your greatest promotion. If you are facing a massive resistance right now, it is because there is a massive reward on the other side of it. God uses giants to qualify kings. Saul saw a problem to be avoided. David saw a platform to be climbed. Do not complain about the size of the opposition. The size of the giant is a direct indicator of the size of the territory God is about to give you. David didn't just get ahead, he got a reputation, he got the king's daughter, and he got a tax-free life for his father's house. He moved from the smell of sheep to the scent of the palace in a single day. Your single day is coming. Stay in the path, keep your sling ready, and remember that the valley is just the hallway to the throne room. Tonight, as you reflect on the strategy of David, understand that the same spirit that lived in him lives in you. You are not a victim of your circumstances. You are not a slave to the giants of this world. You are a carrier of the sovereign path. The giant is loud, but he is temporary. The king is quiet, but he is eternal. As you prepare to rest or move into your next battle, make a decree. Do not ask God to take away the giant. Ask him for the courage to run toward the battle line. Declare that every stone you throw in faith will find its mark. Declare that the weapons of your warfare are not carnal but mighty through God. If you believe that your Goliath is falling tonight, if you are ready to pick up your sword and claim your territory, then seal this message. Type "the giant falls" in the comments below. Join the Sovereign Path community and let us walk this journey of authority together. The valley is yours, the victory is yours, and the glory belongs to the King of Kings. Go forth and reign, for the battle is the Lord's, and He has already given you the win. Amen.